Ms. Karen Geathers to come forward and share some of the extraordinary work Burckhalter is doing.
Thank you. Happy to be here. I got a little PowerPoint. There it is. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Good early evening to the Board of Education. I'm proud to be here as current principal of Burckhalter Elementary School. And I got about 5 quick slides. We have been the honorees of the 2009, 2010, 2010, 2011 Title I Achievement Award at Burckhalter. And so that's why I'm here this evening. So apropos to start with a question, because people come into the school and they ask a lot of questions, and the question that's up there is, what's going on over there? So let me give a little bit about that. As part of our kind of overview, our mission, vision, philosophy, there's a statement in there that says, we ask not how smart is the child, but how is the child smart? And I'm a questioner. You know, some people say I'm nosy. I like to say I'm curious. And so when I got there 4 years ago, I just started asking questions and looking and listening. What's going on? What did I hear? What did I see? Who is that? Why is that? And what do we do when we see something? So part of, I think, the reason why we're making the achievement that we're making is because that has now started to permeate throughout the building and outside of the building into the community and with our parents. What I found, really, I got a bit of advice from Principal Leadership Institute, where I got my my administrative credential and my master's from Cal Berkeley. One of the kind of ways of being, ways of thinking, was that they said, unless something's really on fire your first year, just go in and observe, see what's going on. You know, unless you see some real crazy stuff that you know you really need to do something about, just go in. And so my first year, that's what I did. And I started looking and, like I said, questioning. And I saw this whole, what came into my mind probably mid-year was this whole thing about some kids were surviving at the school and some kids were thriving. And started thinking about why that was. Who were the kids that I would call the survivors and who were the kids that were thriving? And then what conditions were present for the thrivers that maybe weren't present for the survivors? And then how can we recreate that over and over again so that we can have more thrivers and fewer survivors? And the way that I defined that was that the survivors basically came to school, they endured, they were there, and the thrivers really flourished, they blossomed. And we use words like that to describe some of the kids that were there. What was interesting to me was that some of the kids, particularly African-American kids, particularly African-American boys, on paper looked to be thrivers. They were doing actually pretty well. They were proficient and advanced in some cases on their CST or their benchmark scores, but they were also the kids that I would see in my office a lot for behavior referrals, for instance, or they might be having some interesting things happening when they were not in class. And so I was struck by this idea that on paper, someone might suggest that they were thrivers, but they actually were survivors. And what is it that we needed to do to kind of change that dynamic? What happened as a result of that was conversations, questions. Burckhalter at that time had, 6 regular ed teachers, 4 special ed teachers, all women, except for the PE teacher that was there 2 days a week. And so I started talking to the women in our meetings about what is that? You know, when I go into classrooms, and I did, my focus every year has been to follow a class upstairs, sit for about 15, 20 minutes or longer, make it to every other class, and just do that kind of in the morning, maybe after lunch, and then towards the end of the day, just to see what was going on. And what was interesting was we started having conversations about what was happening and how we, women, would respond to kind of some behaviors when girls did it and when boys did it. And that led to some really, I'd say, courageous conversations about what we bring to the table, how we deal with what it is that we see. And once we started thinking about it, once we started talking about it, once we started engaging in it, we began to see things change. Two things came out of the first year. One thing was we instituted what's called a Wednesday rap session with all of the kids, 2nd through 5th grade. They all would come in on Wednesdays. It's a short day anyway. I found a lot of times it was just 20 minutes that people were getting kids ready to go home. And I'd ask the teachers if I could take 15 minutes of that, have all of the kids come in off the yard, and we began to talk about things that might be happening midweek, good and not so good, things in class and things on the yard that were impacting the students' abilities to really be students, to really thrive. The first, I'd say, month or so, it was basically adult-led. It was teachers, it was me, it might be the person, yard duty person, but the kids slowly started taking it over. They would come to me and say, gosh, Ms. Gathers, you know, when we get to Wednesday, we need to talk about thus and so. And we still continue to do that. What we began to see were reductions in things like behavior referrals, because kids now had a way and an avenue and a model to be able to talk through what used to be areas where they might, you know, have physical altercations and things like that. We began to see attendance increase. Burckhalter still probably has one of the highest chronically absent populations of kids, but we also have a growing population of students, particularly in the upper grades, that come to school almost every day. So it was these big dichotomies, and we started to work on that. Kids are in school, they're feeling better about each other, they're getting along, they have an avenue. When kids would come to my office, they would tell me overwhelmingly, particularly the boys, in tears a lot of times, she just won't let me talk. She would, okay, let's start there. And once they were able to do that, oftentimes, even if they still were going to have some consequences, they felt better about it. And so that was one of the things that we kind of talked about on staff. Anyway, I think that, you know, a lot of stuff just started happening. They're the intangibles. It's not about, you know, we adopted a reading program. It wasn't that, you know, we got really skilled at teaching math or anything like that. I think probably the results that we see and continue to see are a result of all of those kinds of things. And so when kids know that they're cared for, even when it's tough love, they're going to have a vehicle. They feel safe, emotionally, socially, physically safe at school. And beyond school, then great things happen. And so what's happened is, and I didn't know this until we were doing the school quality review this year, and they came and brought the data, because when you're in it, you're not realizing something's going on. That's great. I think what they said was, since 2009, our net API growth has been 150 points for all students, 184 for African American students, and that actually happens to be the highest of any OUSD elementary school, and I didn't know that. And so when I saw it on the website this year, 2010, 2011, I actually thought it was a misprint, because I said, oh, they just put the same one up from last year. And when people started texting and calling me over the break, because I think it happened over the break, I was really surprised. Gosh, 2 years in a row, how could we do that? That doesn't make any sense. But it does when you begin to have everybody kind of taking up the philosophy, modeling, really, you know, becoming imbued with this idea that kids don't just need to survive, they need to thrive. And we need to create the conditions for everybody to be able to do that. So the answers actually led to more questions. You know, they make us reflect. We're getting ready to expand and maybe not double our size, but almost close. We're looking forward to that. The answers are painful at times. We sat and cried. We're women, so we did a lot of that. But out of that, we really started thinking about, okay, now that that's over, what is it that I need to do? What is it that we need to do? what do we model for our kids, our families, and everybody, so that even when we leave, this becomes sustainable. Because it can't be the dynamic leader leading. You know, if I step out, then it still needs to be able to go on. If that teacher leaves, then it still needs to be able to go on. What is it that we need to do? I talked about the courageous conversations already, very courageous conversations. And ultimately, we have more questions now. How do we continue to replicate this? You know, as we expand and grow, as our population changes, how do we continue to do this? And so that's where we are right now, asking those questions of ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as many of you know in the audience, Ms. Geathers is an incredible teacher and supporter of teachers. And I just want to, yeah. So just to give the list, there we have of the California Title I schools that won Achievement Awards this year, Burckhalter, Cleveland, and Lincoln. And then we had 2 other schools that were California Distinguished Schools this year, Acorn, Woodland, and Kaiser. So just recognizing and shout outs to all those folks in the audience.